In Baghdad, this ranking of humanity is so unapologetic. White Westerners get blast walls and body armor. Iraqis have prayer beads to protect them from the violence. And it's totally unapologetic. The Westerners roar through the streets in these convoys and Humvees and armored vehicles, pointing their guns out the window, saying, "My life counts, your life doesn't count." And I had that terrible feeling. Is this the future? Is this optimistic, Seth? Now, when Hurricane Katrina hit, many of us had the feeling that it was so obvious that this was a failure of this economic model that it would, somebody wrote, it was a sort of a mea culpa by a neoliberal. He said, the breaking of the levees in New Orleans will be for neoconservatives what the fall of the Berlin Wall was for communism. That it will collapse their ideology because their ideology showed its true brutality in that moment. It was the neglected public sector. The levees themselves, they'd said, fix them, fix them, fix them, and they didn't fix them. They just let it crumble, and they turned the money, they had the money, they just turned the money into sweetheart deals for politically connected friends. It wasn't about a lack of money. And the public infrastructure of New Orleans was so weathered that it couldn't handle the mass evacuation. So this all coalesced and everyone saw it. This disaster that is hidden in plain sight every day, but suddenly there was nowhere to hide when we saw the residents of New Orleans, the poor working class, mostly African American residents of New Orleans, on their roofs asking for help and the help not coming. And many of us thought this would be the moment to put the ideology on trial. It didn't happen. It didn't happen for the reasons that the CCPA is so important, because we weren't ready with our policy ideas, our proposals to say, this is the way you rebuild this city. We didn't have the strength of our convictions. We had the outrage at what they were doing, but we didn't say, this is a new deal for New Orleans. This is what it would look like. So they ended up with the corporate New Deal for New Orleans. Now, why did that happen? It happened because they're ready. Who's they? Well, September 13th, 2 weeks after Hurricane Katrina made landfall, there was a meeting at the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation really is the ground zero of the counter-revolution against the welfare state. It has been since it was founded in 1973. It was a meeting, went on all night. Representatives of all the big right-wing think tanks, Cato, Hoover, and also the Republican Study Group in Congress, which are all the most ideological Republican Congress people. They stayed up and they made a list, 32 free market solutions for Hurricane Katrina. The first one was to roll back labor standards in the region so that you could hire whoever you wanted at whatever wage you wanted. That was the first on the list. Next one, instead of rebuilding the public schools, give parents vouchers that they can use in charter schools. Roll back environmental standards. Turn the Gulf Coast into a free market enterprise zone, is what they called it, basically tax holidays. And then, just for the hell of it, allow drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Reserve, because they're psychotic. Anyway, within days, Bush is championing every single one on the list, including building new refineries for the first time in the 70s along the Gulf Coast. Sorry. They were ready. It's easy to be ready when you have the same solution for any problem. You just, it's a franchise. Hurricane Katrina, you just change the name. It's the same solutions no matter what the crisis is. Now, one of the people who saw opportunity in the floodwaters of New Orleans was Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman was 93 years old, in ailing health, as we now know. And he still managed to get the energy up to write an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal. In this op-ed, he said, New Orleans schools are in ruins. The teachers, families, parents are scattered throughout the country. This is a tragedy, he wrote. It is also an opportunity. Then he proceeded to explain that this was the moment to transform New Orleans' education system into a charter school system, which means public money going to private schools, many of them run for profit. Well, that right-wing think tank complex was so ready that they descended on New Orleans within hours. And today, you can see their handiwork. Before Hurricane Katrina hit, there were 5 charter schools and 175 public schools. They opened 30 public schools, and there are now 40 charter schools in New Orleans. They went from 5 to 40 in a year. They busted the teachers' union completely. They fired 4,700 teachers. They don't have a contract anymore. This was the opportunity. Now, those ended up actually being Milton Friedman's sort of last words, because they were, that was his final public policy recommendation. He died a few months later. And in some ways it seems like small potatoes for a guy like Milton Friedman. Once again, it's not Mongolian yaks, but it's, he was feted as the greatest public intellectual of the last half century when he died. But this was where he expended his last energy, was thinking about how to take advantage of the people of New Orleans in their weakest moment, when they could not protect their public institutions because they were scattered throughout the country, to break the teachers' union, and to replace public schools with for-profit ones.